NSA leaker Edward Snowden resurfaced over the Christmas holiday, sitting down for an interview with an American journalist and delivering a Christmas Day video message to the people of the UK. Snowden was chosen by Britain's Channel 4 to broadcast its traditional alternative address to the Queen's Christmas Day speech.
A child born today will grow up with no conception of privacy at all. They'll never know what it means to have a private moment to themselves, an unrecorded, unanalyzed thought. And that's a problem, because privacy matters. Privacy is what allows us to determine who we are and who we want to be.
Snowden also gave a lengthy interview to the Washington Post's Barton Gellman, who, along with a pair of reporters from Britain's Guardian, was the recipient of a trove of leaked NSA documents from Snowden earlier this year. Snowden revealed his satisfaction with the way his leaks have been received by the public, telling Gellman, "For me, in terms of personal satisfaction, the mission's already been accomplished. I already won. As soon as the journalists were able to work, everything that I had been trying to do was validated because, remember, I didn't want to change society. I wanted to give society a chance to determine if it should change itself." Snowden's declaration of mission accomplished came 6 months after he revealed his greatest fears back in a Hong Kong hotel room in June.
The greatest fear that I have regarding the outcome for America of these disclosures is that nothing will change.
The leak sparked a worldwide discussion about government surveillance, and whether things will change remains unclear. Before leaving for Hawaii, President Obama said he was open to changes such as those recommended by a presidential task force impaneled to review the NSA programs, but he was ultimately non-committal on the future of government information gathering.
The question we're going to have to ask is, can we accomplish the same goals that this program is intended to accomplish in ways that give the public more confidence that, in fact, the NSA is doing what it's supposed to be doing.
Evidence that things may not be changing came within the last hour, as New York federal judge William Pauley has just dismissed an ACLU lawsuit challenging the constitutionality of the phone records program, saying the government had, quote, adapted to confront a new enemy. And joining us now is Washington Post contributor Barton Gellman. Thanks for being here. So Bart, quickly, let me get your reaction to the judge's ruling. I know we're just sort of receiving it now, but what is your reaction to this being, the phone program specifically being declared lawful?
So we now have, within about 10 days' time, 2 federal judges ruling on this in opposite directions. Slightly different facts, slightly different reasoning, but one says it is almost certainly unconstitutional against the Fourth Amendment. One says it's just fine. It's very much ripe for Supreme Court consideration as time goes forward.
Now, so you are obviously one of the 3 journalists who received the original leaks to Snowden, but your understanding is, I just want to get on the record, that he has now given over all of the leaked documents to the Washington Post and to the Guardian. He is no longer in possession of any of this material. Is that correct?
Right. He brought nothing with him to Russia precisely because he did not want to be forced to hand it over. He gave us documents a bit over 6 months ago. He has had no role in the stories since then. He hasn't given out any more documents since then.
So, Bart, then what do you suppose is the purpose of the sort of manifestos that we're seeing coming out? If he's no longer the person who's supplying the information to the public, what do you think he hopes to get out of doing like this Christmas video, and doing these sort of video dispatches? What do you think the point of that is?
Well, look, for about 6 months, the global media has been beating down his door, and I count myself among those. And I mean, he's turned down millions of dollars in book contract offers, movie, TV. I convinced him at the end of the year that it was time for his voice to be in the conversation. If I'm going to do a looking back, what have we learned? What does it all mean? I'd like him to be a part of that, and he went along.
And so what do you think you learned new in this interview that we didn't already know? What sort of new about what you discussed with him?
Well, I think he spoke much more deeply than before about the roots of his decision, why he thought it was okay for him to make that decision, and what he thinks has come of it. But for a guy who worried about whether he'd have any impact, to have 6 months of intensive global debate, to have a federal judge rule that it's unconstitutional, to have the president...
Well, that it may be unconstitutional. I think the first judge...
What he said was almost certainly. He hadn't reached the merits yet. Have the president's own advisory panel say it needed to be scaled way back, and 45 other recommendations to have Silicon Valley sort of rising up against what the NSA is doing in their own networks. he certainly has provoked a debate that a number of people think has some merit.
Well, it's interesting because it's sort of the opposite reaction that happened when James Rice and Eric Lichtblau came out with information about the same programs pre-court involvement when they were warrantless, and the reaction was that Democrats basically codified it into law. I want to just point you to one quote from your piece where Snowden sort of reacts to the fact that, within the National Security Agency, his former colleagues see him as a complete traitor, as having violated every oath and every confidence that was imparted in him, even though he was a contractor, not a staffer. So he says to you, I'm not trying to bring down the NSA. I'm working to improve the NSA. I'm still working for the NSA right now. They are the only ones who don't realize it. Is he... I guess, did he address the counter argument to what he's done? Essentially, people saying part of what he did was to also expose the fact that our government, for instance, spies on other governments, something that seems self-evident when you look at national security, things that might just undermine the prestige or embarrass the United States, but that don't necessarily have probative value.
He has a broad view, which he knows is not everyone's, and it's a debate that's happening right now, that espionage ought to be targeted, ought to be focused, not on everybody because you can, not collecting millions, actually hundreds of millions of internet address books as they flow across the pipes, billions of locations of cell phones around the world, every world leader just because you can. He says that's his view. He would like to have a debate about that. He also said that part of the newsworthiness is that if the U.S. government is denying spying on Germans, is saying we followed German law, and then you find out literally 2 weeks later that you're spying on the chancellor, that's worthy of a conversation.
Yeah, we find out that other countries, well, let's not get into the debates and spying thing, but I mean, it's a good point. So, Ryan, I'm curious, when you look at the sort of twin requests that we as citizens broadly, being generalizing here, make of the government. Keep us totally safe and protect our privacy. We ask both to be done of the government. What do people who absolutely want these programs done away with, not just changed, but really done away with, including the metadata collection program, how do they think, or do they have ideas about how the NSA should go about finding that needle in a haystack? They have a dirty number. It was called from somewhere in Lahore, Pakistan, or somewhere, and they know that it was called into the United States, but they don't know to whom. How do people on the civil liberties side believe the NSA should proceed in that case?
Well, I guess I'm not sure I'd agree with your initial framework, the way you would set that up. We don't really demand things of our government. We are our government, and that's what Snowden is saying. That he's not, in his interview with Bart, he said, "I'm not trying to say the world needs to change. I just want to give the country the ability to change. You have to know what the country is doing
describe specifically what that change would look like, because if in fact we're saying that our signals intelligence agencies should not look in the haystack that includes American phone numbers, then what is the proposal that people in the civil liberties community want to see replace the phone program?
Well, I mean, the civil liberties folks can speak for themselves, but we have a Fourth Amendment. And if we want that Fourth Amendment to mean anything, then we have to abide by what it says, which is that you won't unreasonably seize and obtain and search citizens' property. I mean, that's what it's pretty clear.
But that doesn't get to the answer to what we are asking. I mean, the NSA started out as a signal intelligence bureau that was searching electronic signals that go through the air. Now those signals cross borders, internet connections cross borders. If you're looking for a specific contact that a foreign terror suspect made with the United States, I mean, it is fine to say just respect the Fourth Amendment, but what are the specifics attached?
I guess I think immediately about the Boston bombing, and immediately the question was, how did this happen? How did we know? How did we miss that? What phone number? Who called who? Why didn't we know that? I mean, and so I guess that we do have to kind of put it to where you were saying, Joy, in the very realistic framework of there are dual responsibilities here, right? How do we keep ourselves safe, and so things like that don't happen? Because certainly for those who were injured on that day, I bet they would have been fine with a little bit more spying if it would have stopped what happened. At the same time, I think we all want to make sure that our government is proceeding in a way that we think is consistent with our values. I think it is very hard. I think as Americans, though, we have to be a lot more clear about what it is we're asking for. And it bothered me in his statement when he said, children won't know privacy. Kids are giving up their privacy every day on Twitter and Facebook, more information than they should be. And in some instances, parents are able to stop them. But we give away our information freely. So if we're really concerned about that, we we need to be concerned about that, both from the perspective of the government, but also companies like Target that just really blew it on people's privacy and data, and what these companies are doing with our data.
Well, that's a really good question, because since you have been, Bart, following this story, is there a concern, and Wired has a piece up that talks about the potential concern if the NSA recommendations are adopted. And right now you have various companies that keep people's cellular data for different amounts of time, right? So Verizon will keep it for a year, Sprint for just 18 months, AT&T for 5 years, T-Mobile for 7 to 10 years. It's very disparate. If the recommended reforms are adopted, it will become uniform, and it could be really long. It could be 7 to 10 years of your data being held by a private company. To Karen's point, Target got hacked. Would we be any more secure with a private entity holding the same data as opposed to us, the government?
Well, first of all, my view is why choose? I think you can be very much concerned about the amount of commercial surveillance that's going on, which is unprecedented in world history. And I'm certainly, as a citizen, as a consumer, unhappy with it. A friend of mine just synchronized their smartphone with Facebook, okay? That means that Facebook now knows my personal cell phone number, my personal email address that I carefully chose not to give to Facebook. So it's not just that you're recklessly giving up your own data, it's that these companies are collecting an enormous amount that you don't even know is happening.
But Joy, there are thoughtful critics of the NSA. They don't want to abolish the program. What they want to do is just give it more oversight so we know more about what's going on. And so I think it's somewhat a false choice to say, okay, well, we're either going to abolish the NSA and everything it stands for, or we're going to be Edward Snowden. The question is, like Oregon Senator Ron Wyden, can we get this thing out in the public a little more, protect Americans, but also have legitimate oversight where there's checks and balances, so there's not an entire thing that's operating secret, not just the program, but the whole judicial proceedings, all the oversight was in secret too, and that's really what should be more public.
We should be doing that in a commercial setting as well, because again, Facebook has this information and data, and they sell it and make money on it, and we don't have the right to ask them about our own information.
Yeah, and they're the ones that are being subpoenaed. So one last question to you, Bart, what about the fact that now your news organization and The Guardian and other news organizations that have this data are essentially, now you guys are the ones classifying this data. Rather than the government, it's you guys that are determining what we get to see and what we don't get to see in the information that Ed Snowden gave you. Is there any discomfort for you in that? Now, you're the classifier.
It's certainly a strange role, but it's actually not entirely new. I've been doing, I've been a journalist for 25 years. A lot of that has been in national security field. A lot of that has touched on classified material, because almost everything to do with foreign policy and defense is classified. And there's no one in government who would claim there's not a massive amount of over-classification. So I've always been in the position of finding things out that I'm not supposed to know, and then deciding how much to tell readers. Sometimes there are clear, obvious harms that would come from publication, and we don't do it. But we think our job is to push the line, tell people more about their own government than the government wants to say. Otherwise, we're publishing press releases.
Yeah, well, and I think there is also a debate to have about that, because then the decisions are being made in a newsroom in a very small setting, not in the public space of government. But it is a great debate, and you're doing a great job in your journalism. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right. So Washington Post contributor Barton Gelman, we appreciate you being here. And coming up on an American contractor kidnapped by al-Qaeda purportedly pleads with President Obama for help in a new video. We will bring you the story behind Warren Weinstein's abduction just ahead.